Tom Gualtieri.
And I'm David Sisco.
Welcome to Series 2 of Draw the Circle Wide, which explores the need for more equity in the theater.
In each episode, we interview a gifted Broadway performer, having in-depth conversations about their life and their work as an artist, and what needs to change in the industry. Then we craft a song just for them based on their interview.
As our industry continues to have long overdue conversations about race, equity, and inclusion, we want to use this series to celebrate performers who come from communities that have been underrepresented in the theater and create work for these artists by listening to their voices.
In this episode, we talk to Aisha Jackson, who was born and raised in College Park, Georgia. Aisha grew up singing in the church with her family and realized from a young age that she wanted to use her God-given gifts to spread joy and inspiration. After auditioning for the touring production of Beautiful, the Carole King musical, she was cast as a swing for the Broadway production. She has also appeared in the original productions of Waitress and Frozen, where we had the pleasure of seeing her play Anna. During the pandemic, she recommitted herself to fighting for much-needed change in the theater industry and in the world. Aisha's effervescent personality shines through the screen in this interview, where she candidly shares about her life and experiences in the theater.
What got you started on your road to performing? We know that I think Timoon was your first
Little Timoon, yes. My older brother went to a performing arts high school. We all went to the same performing arts high school. But at the time, he was there. I was in like 6th grade. And he came home and he was like, so we need a little girl like to play the little Timoon in Once on This Island. Do you want to audition? And of course I was like, yes! And I don't really think I fully understood what that meant to be in a musical. I just knew it was singing, which is what I did with my family, and my entire family sings. My dad is a pastor, so we like grew up singing in church together. We would like go to the local mall and carol for Christmas and things like that. So I knew it was another opportunity to sing with my brothers. And I said, yes, let's do it. And I auditioned and got the part. And then as soon as I got into the room to start rehearsing, I saw Big Timoon and I was like, oh, I want to be Big Timoon. So I think that's where, that passion was birthed inside of me to desire to dig into a new way of using my gifts to spread joy and light and tell a story, Atlanta, Georgia to Greeley, Colorado for college. So that was a complete and total shift of things. Me going from being surrounded by people who look like me to going into a classroom and being able to count how many people look like me. And so then coming to New York, what we also have to think about is the fact that my mother is from New York. So I had been to New York and like growing up and things like that. So I don't think that there was such a stark contrast of like, I don't see myself and things like that. I do feel like New York can be just as much as a melting pot as Atlanta. But when it comes to performing arts and comes to theater and Broadway and things like that, of course, the perspective has shifted a little bit. I know that like sometimes I would be called in for auditions and I'd say, oh, they want to look at me for that? Like, oh, okay, cool, great. This is awesome. But my brain was already trained to like, there are certain things that I might not be seriously considered for. You'll bring me in the room because you can't discriminate and you have to bring in everyone to be seen for the part, but will you actually hire me for the part? Are you actually considering me, or are you just checking off a box and allowing me to come into the space? But on the other hand, I believe growing up and seeing myself represented in so many shapes and forms and different parts of the industry, of the theater industry, coming to the city, I was very confident in the fact that I could play these things. And so even though that little voice in the back of my head is like, well, maybe not, the voice in the front of my head was like, go in, do your thing, and just like walk in confidence and know that you are capable to play these parts, whether they deem you capable or not.
What are like your dream roles? What are the roles you want to play, like revivals of things or anything, crossing gender boundaries, crossing color boundaries? What are the roles that you dream of playing that you see yourself doing?
Well, it's funny because whenever someone asks me this question, I go, it has not been written yet. My dream role is a role that I want someone to create it's specifically for me, with me in mind, with my voice in mind, portraying a character that fully uses all of my gifts and my skills.
Is there something that you've always wanted to sing about? Is there something, a memory that you have, or even just a topic or an idea or a phrase, a word or a phrase that you feel like would be a good song?
So my brother, Vaughn Jackson, he passed away the summer before my senior year of high school. And whenever I sit down and think of him, I'm always reminded of the conversations that we would have, the check-ins that we would have with one another. And I remember missing those conversations with him as I went through my senior year in high school. Things would happen and I would be like, oh, I want to call Vaughn. And then I'd realize I can't call him. So then I had to kind of shift into this journal that I would write out conversations to him about keeping him updated with what was going on in my life. And as I started to imagine those conversations and sort of imagine a play about these conversations or a scene, and something that I've always wanted to write about or write a song about is I envision this young lady, me or any character, coming to this bench in the play or in the song. Her brother comes and sits next to her, and then she sings about things that are happening in her life. And it's whenever she's at this bench, she's talking to him or she's having this conversation, and it serves as an outlet for her to not feel alone and for her to feel like she still has that connection with him.
But do we have your permission that if that's the idea that sparks me, to use that idea to create a song for you?
I give you permission. We can talk about it. We can see what happens. Week of opening, a couple days after we'd opened, and they told me that Patty had bronchitis. And so it was a 2-show day. She pushed through the matinee, but for the second show, they came and told me, no, I think she's going to push through. It's okay. And then 2 minutes later, they came back and said, actually, you're going to be Anna. And I was like, okay. It was in between shows, and we had about 2 hours from the moment they told me till it was places. And we literally rehearsed. They were like, what do you need? And I was like, everything. Put all the pieces together and rehearsed all the way up until places. And then places came, and I was like, here we go. Just trust yourself and just do it. And in that moment, I had to fully believe in myself. I could not doubt myself. I couldn't question myself, because if I did, then I would just start to unravel. At the end of the show, I looked across the stage and looked at Casey Levy, and I was like, I'm about to walk center stage and take a bow with Casey Levy. First of all, let's just stop there, but also take a bow with her as, her co-lead, as her sister and as a principal on Broadway. And I took that bow and I walked off stage, and I felt so amazing and proud of myself. The next couple of days of me going on, a woman came up to me and told me that she was sitting next to an African-American little princess in her dress. And when I came out on stage, she was like, Mommy, she looks like me. And I bawled my eyes out and just sat in that and was like, you not shying away from this and not being afraid that you didn't have rehearsal or whatever. You stood in that, you stood in your power, and then you helped another person out there in the audience to see themselves represented. And I was like, okay, so this is the sort of impact that you can have when you shut out the noise, when you shut out people saying that maybe you are not appropriate for this character, when you shut out people saying, maybe you're not ready or anything. When I shut out myself, when I shut out my doubt and I quiet those nerves in my mind, the power that I can have to inspire the younger generation to know that they can do this too, or that they're beautiful, or that they can embody these princesses. So all of that together, I was like, okay, this is great.
You are the first woman of color to play Anna. And
on Broadway, there was a woman of color to play her in the parks.
Thank you for the correction. But on Broadway, and while that's a wonderful distinction, it also is we see that as a problem because it denies the conversation that we're already starting to have, which is great, about equity. we would love to move beyond firsts.
This is a conversation I've had with my friends, actually, of like the joy that I have, of course, of being able to embody this role and as a Black woman, bring her to life. And of course, you know, Frozen was a movie, and this was its first time being turned into a musical. So anyone who plays the part on Broadway is technically going to be a first. But like it needs to be more. We don't need to have firsts. Like the fact that Wicked has been around for 15 years, and the first Black Glenda was this past 2019, Brittany Johnson. What is that? What is that? And that, it's like, is there any, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. And if you have this long running show, it's like, why won't we take the opportunity to do that? And I know like the amount of Elphabas on Broadway that have been women of color, I believe you can also count on one hand. And so it's just like, what the character is green. She is literally painted green. But when we write these roles, we write them with a white voice in mind. We don't write them with other people of color in mind. And so when you look at the part, and we as people of color see the part, we're like, oh, we can play that. But when the playwright or the composer or the lyricist can't expand their brain when they're writing these parts to be inclusive of everyone, then you're never going to see someone like us occupy the role full time. And on top of that, I want us to also get away from making the person of color the standby or the understudy always. And because when you do that, you also perpetuate this idea that like you're good enough to play the role, but not all the time. So we need to make sure that we give our audience a white person so that they can receive them and it's more palatable. But then every now and then we'll let you do it. We need to stop using those excuses and just make the audience receive it. Because then if they know that this is what happens, then they start to change their way of thinking. And you're not encouraging them to keep their minds closed when we're imagining these characters. Of course, our white counterparts can write stories and characters about human beings, and we can embody those human beings. But at the end of the day, if you want the correct perspective, or if you want those experiences to come from a genuine place of understanding and knowledge, you have to have someone of that race or ethnicity on your team, or you have to have them involved in the writing in some way. And so I think it's important as we write these new musicals and these new shows and we produce them, that we make sure that there are people of color in the room that can speak from that perspective, and that can be there for your actors also to be able to talk to and say, hey, I mean, that's not really how that would go, because I'm going to be more comfortable to go to someone who shares that perspective than to have to come to someone who doesn't get it at all and then have to like spell it out and then be turned away and be like, well, that's not what we want. And it's like, but this is the culture you're writing about, and this is the, and so it's just like once we have more people of color in the room to voice their perspective and voice their opinion and protect us, the actors who have to bring these characters to life, to make sure we have space to say, I'm sorry, that's like, I am a Black woman and I just feel like that is incorrect, or it's offensive, or it's this, or it's that, and be able to have that collaborative moment in that conversation.
That this is on every single level, that this is casting, this is stage management, this is education, this is everything, that we have to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. And
rebuilding the foundation of all of it. It's pulling up those roots and planting new seeds, because it wasn't even planted correctly. I think it's better when we have these conversations when our white counterparts show up educated as much as they can be, so that then, because it isn't our job to educate every white person about how to treat us better, but it is our job as human beings to make sure we have these conversations of like, no, I don't like that. And there'll be things as a Black woman that I don't prefer that another Black woman might be perfectly fine with, which is why we also don't want just one person of color in the room, so that we have all these different perspectives. But no, it's important for us to have these conversations and make sure we're showing up to listen to one another on both sides.
and feeling low. I don't need to hear your voice to know you're speaking to my soul. These conversations take me back where I love to be, sitting on our hidden bench. You stay right next to me. And then this is the chorus. Da, da, ya, da, 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 ya, da.
What do you think the chorus is about?
I mean, I think the chorus is about today. And today I'm standing on faith because I know, because I'm at the bench and you're not here, but I know that we're still talking.
I have a weird discomfort with writing a gospel song for a Black woman. I do think, because of her deep faith and because of her vocal ability, that style of music lives in her wheelhouse.
Let's give it to her. Be like, hey, this is what we think is the first two, A sections. Mm-hmm. We realize that we are two white writers writing in a gospel tradition.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. Or yeah, absolutely.
I noticed in your bio that you quote Luke chapter 1, verse 37.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to read it because I was get nervous about misquoting the Bible. Although I've had many people misquote it to me.
Sure you have.
Yes, I have.
We all have.
We all have, yes. But for with God, all things are possible. I wanted to ask you how your faith buoys the work you do as a performer, and I think that's kind of a great question to ask, especially now in the midst of the pandemic.
Faith is huge for me. I mean, the fact that I moved to New York City with no job, no place to stay, and like $150 to my name should tell you how much I depend on faith. But no, I came here and I was just like, okay, God, this is what I feel like you've called me to do. If this is your purpose, let it work out in the way that it should. I know I'm going to have to put in the work. I know that I'm going to have to do my part, but just, open the doors and let me see if this is the right move. And whenever I would put my trust and my faith in God and in the gifts that I feel like he has given me, it continued to open doors. And so I just find myself continuously leaning on that and looking to him for guidance, especially in moments of rejection, which happened so much in this industry. A belief that I have formed is if it's for me, then I'll get it. If it's my blessing, I'll get it. And if I don't get it, that means that it's someone else's blessing and that mine is on the way. And so that has helped me drastically, because there have been moments where there are shows that I'm like, I know I'm perfect for this part, and then I don't get it. And I'm like, okay, God, come on. And then I see that the person who got it was specifically crafted for them at that moment in their life. And then a few months down the road, I see something else that God gifts me, or another opportunity. And I'm like, oh, if I was in that I wanted so badly, I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of this opportunity. So it's kind of my faith and my belief in God has helped me to shift my perspective. Even with Anna as a standby, it was very hard sometimes to go upstairs and sit in your corner and not be used for weeks at a time, and then just at the drop of a hat say, here, we need you, and you're important, and we love you, and you're leading the show. Okay, now go back upstairs. Mm-hmm. That was hard for me. And in those moments, I had to shift my perspective to gratitude, and to shift my perspective to, okay, what can you do in this downtime that you have been gifted? And as I shifted my mindset, I was like, okay, what can I do with this time? Okay, make these dolls for these little girls so that when you do go on, you're also adding another level of joy to the experience when they come to see you. So yeah, my faith is definitely, It's given me perspective. It's allowed me to operate in grace and not to be a negative Nancy or bring other people down. You know, I'm a stickler for like when other people win, make sure you celebrate them, because when you win, you want them to celebrate you. And so I feel like all of these perspectives and values really come from my belief in Christ and my faith in God. Yeah.
Thank you all for your gentle wrapping of this whole process. I think it's been very informative of like who you are as people and as writers, and for you to like pay such close attention to this I just want to say that that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like singing it today, the emotional connection, you don't have to worry about that because it's there. I wasn't even singing it, but I was like listening to it and I was just like, oh, yep, and it like brought up some things, and not in a like negative way, but just like I'll be able to go there.
Connect.
I'm thinking of taking the song in a direction that's a relationship to the singer's mother, where when we come back to the end of the song, the idea is of the singer witnessing her mother at the door with a different sense of, well, the singer would observe the mother in a different state, right? When the singer comes home with her brother, the mother is always a little annoyed that they're late, that she hasn't been told where they were, right? Okay. But at the end of the song, there's a feeling of either joy or sorrow that it's just the singer who comes home. So that would move the song in a really different direction from the original idea, which is the one about the bench and the conversations.
I think it would probably be more emotionally safe to go in the direction of the mother, and then I can still utilize, but I like that it beautifully also ties in a relationship with the brother, because the reason that you were late is because you guys were clowning around or talking on the bench or like getting into things that you shouldn't have been doing. And so, but returning home now alone, that's another, like, I think that's another perspective of the grief of like losing a brother or losing a family member. And like you return to the old things together, but that person's not there anymore.
But it's different now.
Like a different, So I enjoyed that perspective or that storyline.
In watching the interview, I realized that there were two very powerful, very impactful moments of grief for you. You talked about your grandfather and you talked about your brother. And so in a way that made me want to expand out to the family, to your relationship to your family, because your family is clearly very important to you. And I'm getting even just a little choked up talking about it. You know, it's very touching to me to see that. And I want to bring it out in the song. I think, and David shares that with me. But these two ideas were the thing that I was wrestling with. And the big question for me was that I wanted to just speak to you directly and get your blessing, and also see if you felt comfortable going in either direction. I'm leaning towards what we just talked about, because it's like a new idea. It just sort of came out of nowhere. And sometimes when that happens, I feel like, oh, that's the thing.
Follow that.
When it shows its face, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. That's great.
If you had one action item, one proactive step you would like people who watch this interview to take, what would it be?
So we have all these conversations about diversity, right? And I want us to expand our conversations to be about equality, because I feel like a lot of times in Broadway and beyond, diversity has been coined as like, oh, well, we have a couple people of color, so we check that box off. Or especially in musical theaters and in musicals, you know, we have a few people of color in the ensemble, we're good, but your entire principal cast is white. I think we need to start expanding our view to make sure there is equality, and not just on the stage, but also behind the scenes, because I can count on one hand how many general managers or stage managers or company managers or music directors or conductors or the head of wardrobe and the head of hair and makeup I can count on one hand how many contracts I've been on and they look like me, or they are a person of color. So it's important that we have people of color on every level of these productions, you know, from the top to the bottom.
So Aisha's interview, Aisha totally charmed me today. She just is so wise. She kept dropping these knowledge bombs, kind of like Andre, except that with Aisha, she was just sort of casually talking about something and this brilliant, insightful thing would come out. And, you know, there it was.
Totally. Yeah. And I loved how she talked about her faith and how as I perceive it, she uses her faith to ground herself in the fullness of who she is, and how she's interested in creating space for other people to do that, regardless of what their faith journey is. That's very powerful.
Yeah. And she's just a beautiful human and a beautiful intellect, like somebody you want to have around when you're making things, you know.
Absolutely. Note to self.
We will be releasing the premiere performance of the song we wrote for Aisha in a separate video. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
If you'd like to find out more about how to be an ally, check out the resources in the description below this video as well.
With Draw the Circle Wide, we are committed to shining a spotlight on equity and representation. And we hope this webisode has encouraged you to draw the circle wide in your own life.